Okay, hi boys and girls, it's nice and late at night, as you do. Time for a bit of an update. Okay, so after the track day that we had in December, what we found was the LS1. In all my research, what I didn't find before I had installed the motor is apparently the big end bearings are a weak link in these motors, particularly, you know, God knows, 300,000 K odd old motor. So yeah, we've what it's done is it's grabbed a couple of the big end bearings, particularly number 3, and it's absolutely hammered the bearing journal, the crank. That's why the engine stopped working. Was it actually seized the motor up just by grabbing that bearing. It had gone that hot and that bad. The interesting thing is the whole time though the oil pressure had stayed up. So lesson learned. Anyone who's doing one of these conversions or plans on using one of these motors for sustained high revving, I'd strongly recommend getting some, I'm not sponsored here, some ACL race bearings or something to that equivalent. Something decent for the big ends at the very least, and you know, while you're at it, might as well replace the main bearings as well, so bang some race bearings in there, which is what I'll be doing next. So at the moment, engine's out of the car, gearbox sitting on the floor, engine sitting on the stand, crank is, if I can show you just how buggered the crank is, heavy bastard, yeah, here's the crank. So those of you in the know that that's shagged. So it is repairable, but it's one of those things of, I'm fishing around at the moment to see if I can't maybe chase up a second-hand crank. Mostly budget. I'd love to put, you know, flash a new billet stroker crank or something like that in there, but you know, when you're doing this from home, dollars are limited. So yeah, that's the point I'm at with that at the moment. I've got a spare set of heads sitting on the bench there from another motor that the original motor that I bought for this car, which also had a knackered big end bearing. That was number 7. So yeah, only problem I found with these heads here is that they let's see, this one here, I think it is, has got one exhaust valve. I think it was this one. This exhaust valve is leaking just slightly when I fill the port with fuel, so that one's not sealing 100%. And on this one, that port and that port are both leaking. This one's leaking quite heavily. That one's just sort of weeping out, but the point is they're clearly not sealing properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a few porting tools. Just going to polish up the inlet ports here, clean them up nice. I'm not porting the engine by any means. I have no idea what I'm doing there, so all I'm going to do is just polish these ports, intake and exhaust, just smooth them out. All I'm looking to do is maybe help the flow a little bit. I probably won't do much at all, to be honest, but just clean that up, clean some of this flashing up here on the heads here. Obviously clean the gasket material and whatnot. I'll probably send them off to actually get them faced and also get the valve surfaces, get them reground, just get them 3-angle ground. That way I know they're Mickey Mouse. And then I'll put these heads onto the motor once they're finished. They should do the job. I'm hoping anyway. Yeah, then it's just a matter of putting some new bearings into this motor. The heads have to come off anyway because, as I said, number 3 was completely knackered. The big end is, you could probably almost put 1/4 of an inch in between the big end and the crank now. It's that worn out. I know this sounds dodgy, but I do have some spare pistons here from the other motor that are okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some of those pistons out and then I'm going to put those pistons into this motor, pick the best ones from the two engines, put new rings in it, new bearings, race bearings in the bottom end. I'm going to replace this bloody power steering pump because that was leaking on the track day. As you can see, it's already got the double row timing chain. Oh, it's a bit dark, but yeah, double row timing chain, high flow, high performance oil pump, new head gaskets and new head bolts. Put it all back together and put it all back in the car, and before it hits the track next, it will be going down to get dyno tuned, because one of the things that I did notice is particularly over 4,500 revs, you could actually watch the oil pressure gauge, the fuel pressure gauge was diving down. It was starting at around 60 psi, but once you got over 4.5 grand, the fuel pressure was dropping off, so it makes me think the engine was leaning out towards the top end. I haven't, as you can see, I haven't taken the heads off yet to know exactly what it's done inside the motor, but given that it's going to be sustained high revs, sort of, you know, up around that 4, 5, 6,000 RPM mark, I'm thinking I should probably get it tuned, make sure that everything is within its limits and whatnot, make sure the fuel pressure is staying where it needs to be, if not coming up higher. I do have a rising rate reg on it, I've just got to get that hooked up. Then yeah, then it's pretty much just a matter of putting it all back together and putting it back in there, and fingers crossed it should run pretty well then, and should be able to have a bit more fun out on the track without too much more in the way of dramas. At the moment, neither of the cars are running due to some Good Samaritan work that my little brother did with his car, which, as you can see, the paint that we used on it was absolute crap, and Mother Nature's deciding to slowly strip it all off, so you're going to have to respray it, but I mean, it still needed the proper paint job done anyway. But his radiator's not fitted at the moment, so his car's not running either. We're aiming to get both of the cars back on track again, probably around about, there's an April track day I believe at Malala. If we can get them done sooner, we will. It'll come down to the almighty dollar, so yeah, that's pretty much it at the moment. Not really much of an update, I suppose, but it's a few details on where we're at, and yeah, done a few little side projects, like I've made these little boxes for the car to sit on, front and rear, which they're 12-inch boxes, complete cubes. The idea being that what I'm going to do is make a plate that will go in, that'll be able to be inserted into it, that'll have a bearing and a plate on it, so the wheel can sit in that hole, so that the wheel can sit on top of that, and then I'll be able to turn the wheel, so I'll be able to do alignments and whatnot here in my garage. I know, probably not perfect, but I'm backyard, you know, like I don't have fancy tools like lasers and all that sort of jazz, and sad to say, in my experience of trying to get alignments around here in Adelaide, the 3 alignments I've had so far, by recommended places, every one of them was different, not one of them was right. The closest I found was in Wingfield. He did a really good job on mine, then my brother took his car down there and the guy completely screwed it up. So at least when it comes to our track cars, I think we'll do them ourselves. We can't do them any worse than they are. So yeah, at this point, that big bird's nest of wiring there, which I know it looks like shit, but it worked. The purpose of that track day for me was testing and seeing what works and what doesn't, and I now know what works. I know that everything was working in the car. The only problems that I found with it was the gear shifter was, it needs some thread lock on the bolts because they kept coming loose while I was trying to do the job. Sorry, while I was out there on the track. I did notice that the diff temperature seemed to sort of waver a bit, almost. I'm not sure if the diff oil was too thin or what the case was, because every now and again it would sort of spike quite high, and then it'd drop down. I think when you're on brakes it was spiking that it was high, and then when you accelerated it'd cool down again. So I'd say that maybe the oil wasn't staying near the probe. Other than that, yeah, it was just really the engine. desperately need some decent tyres because these things were skating everywhere, and I've got to get around to making a proper rear wing for it, because that piece of crap that I got off eBay, which that's what you get when you buy cheap shit, that collapsed on the second lap. It was my first angry lap on the track, and one side of it completely collapsed. It just folded up. So, lesson learned, don't buy cheap shit off eBay. It won't work. But yeah, so I need to redo the rear wing, and then yeah, it's just new bearings, put the engine back together, and get it tuned. Fingers crossed. All this bird's nest here, that'll get redone, and I know it seemed pointless, but it'll get redone a lot neater and a lot simpler with a heavier gauge of wire for a starter. That's very fine gauge wire, and I don't expect it to last long term. It did the job on the day, but you know, that's going to have to be changed. Other than that, it's just a matter of filling all of the bloody holes in the firewall and in the quarter panels and so on, so that in the event that I do have a big spill like I did last time, the car doesn't fill with dirt while I'm flying around off the track, because that was pretty unpleasant. All I can say is thank God I had a full face helmet on the day, because even then I was still having a bit of trouble breathing. The dirt is not pleasant. But yeah, all in all, I mean, it's a basic car. It's a backyard job. There has been some outside help. I got the tail shaft custom made by Hardy Spicer here in Adelaide. They modified that to suit. And yeah, other than that, I had a mate of mine, Marlou. I don't think he's going by that name anymore these days, but Marlou Performance, mate of mine, Lou, he custom made the engine mounts for me and the gearbox mount. He also custom made the headers for me, and they all seem to work really well. The sump, again, it all fitted in the car beautifully. It works quite well. The exhaust system that I made myself does need some tweaking. I did find that it was sitting a little bit low, mainly just for loading and unloading on the trailer, but it's going to need some attention, and yeah, so that'll need to be changed. But other than that, yeah, some new tyres, some new brakes all round, and fix this engine, and should be ready to rock and roll again. And fingers crossed, once all that's done, it should be pretty reliable then. Then the next big step for the car after that's going to be getting the roll cage installed, which I'm not too panicked about, because at the moment the car is still in the dialing in stages and I'm not really pushing it too hard. I mean, I did have that big moment that scared the crap out of me, but I'm not really pushing it too hard. So, and these cars are ridiculously strongly built. I've heard stories of them hitting a wall, bending like a banana, and the driver just climbed out and walked away and not a scratch on him. So that said, I don't plan to test that theory. I'd really like to keep running this car without major injury, but it will be on the list. That's pretty much it's a goal for the end of the year. By the end of this year, I want this car to have a roll cage in it. I'd like my brother's one to have one as well, because I really don't want to make that phone call. But yeah, so that's pretty much where we're at the moment. It's not a major update, I suppose, but it is where we're at for the new year. So now it's just a matter of working my butt off, getting some money and buying some parts. So yeah, thanks for following the journey so far. If you like what I'm up to, yeah, feel free to like and subscribe. Tell your friends, that'd be great. This is just a hobby. I'm not professionally racing it, at least not at this stage. I am trying to keep it within sports sedan rules for building. That way, if down the track I find I can afford it and I can get into it, the car will comply. The only real problem with doing that is that, as a friend told to me today, the problem is you build a car today for today's rules and they've changed tomorrow. But within reason, it shouldn't be too hard to modify. So yeah, it's coming along slowly. There was a big rush last year to get it all happening, and it worked. It died, but it worked. So yeah, as I say, if you like what we're doing, please like, share, subscribe, whatever. As I say, I'm not getting anything out of this other than pleasure, and I hope you guys are enjoying what we're doing, and yeah, feel free to comment if you want any more info or things like that. So yeah, end of the day, I'm doing this for me, so if you guys like it too, that's great. Alright, I hope you all had a good Christmas and New Year's period and all your holidays and whatnot, and sorry to say we're all back to work again, so alright, thanks for following, enjoy, cheers.